we're not creating an emotional connection with our patients. You need to understand this. We make decisions emotionally, not logically. Now, we're going to justify them logically, but emotionally. This means it's about some level of connection that we have. Ongoing chiropractic care makes great sense, but if our patients don't have an emotional connection with us, our retention is going to suffer. So how do we go about creating an emotional connection? Okay, you're going to hear me say this again. We do this by listening deeply, okay, by making our patients feel seen and heard. We do this by validating their concerns, whatever they might be. We want to listen to them. So when somebody comes up with some form of objection management, we want to stop, we want to listen, we want to mirror back what they said, and then we want to let them know that makes sense. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I simplify the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In today's episode, we're diving into one of the most critical topics for any chiropractor who's looking to build a thriving practice. We're talking about retention. Now, let's face it, retention can often feel like a pretty tough nut to crack. We focus so much energy on new patients. How do we go about getting them in the door that sometimes we forget the real key to long-term success is keeping those patients that we already have engaged and committed to their care plans. Now, retention is not just about good business. It's about delivering on the promise that we make to every patient who walks in the door. Now, here's the thing. Chiropractic care is most effective when it's consistent. The true magic of what we do unfolds over time as the adjustments help the body to heal and strengthen and adapt. When a patient drops out of care prematurely, they miss out on the full potential of care, and that's a disservice to them and their health. Okay, but there's another side of this as well, and I know that we need to address this. Retention is also the cornerstone to a sustainable practice. It's a business thing that we need to be thinking of. And every time a patient drops out, we're left chasing new ones to come in to fill the gaps. This constant cycle of churn drains time, energy, and resource, and it keeps us on the perpetual cycle of kind of hustling for new business. On the other side, a steady base of committed patients there provides stability and allows us to plan confidently, and it gives us the freedom to focus on deeper relationships and even better care as well. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing 13 strategies to help you improve your retention. Now, my challenge to you is just choose 3 of these to implement immediately, okay? You can get started on these this week. I don't want you to get into overwhelm. Small changes applied consistently over time will create a ripple effect that will not only transform your practice, but it'll also really help you change more lives in the process as well. So whether you're looking to grow your practice, to enhance your patients' outcomes, or to finally get off the hamster wheel of needing new patients week after week after week, stick with me. Let's master the art of retention together, okay? Now, number 1 is stop thinking about retention coming from the new patient and the report of findings visit. There's an old saying in golf, the biggest golf tournament that we have in the world is the Masters. It's a 4-day tournament and it happens over Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And there's a saying that you can't win the Masters on Thursday and Friday, but you can lose it. Now, retention doesn't come from our new patient and our report of findings visit, but you can ruin it from there, okay? Now, when we put this undue pressure on ourselves, it has a tremendous impact on the way that we go into those visits. We either end up going into them needy, or we can go in there with a tendency to want to manipulate and use fear to get people to take action. Now, neither of these is going to give you the outcome that you ultimately want, okay? What we want to be doing from these first 2 visits is making sure that we're prioritizing patient autonomy, recognizing that the decision to start care and then ultimately to stay under care is up to the patients, okay? We want to share recommendations without projecting our personal needs or our expectations. The second is make sure that we maintain a level of professional detachment. As I mentioned before, there's nothing more unattractive than neediness, whilst when we maintain that professional detachment, it can be really quite attractive. Now, it's totally natural for you to desire positive outcomes for our practice members. We all want this. but we want to avoid letting our business goals or our personal needs get in the way, okay? We need to make sure that we set realistic expectations. Understand, not every patient is going to start care, and not every patient wants to be under long-term care. So we need to let go of this. And so we need to make sure that we're regularly assessing our own motivations to ensure that they align with our patient-centered approaches, okay? So mistake number one is that we put way too much pressure on the new patient visit, way too much pressure on the reported findings visit. Now, I'm going to dive a little deeper into those two visits and talk to you about what we should be doing. But first of all, no, the new patient reported findings, they're really about conversion. They're about getting people to start. It's the rest of the things that we do is where retention comes from, okay? Now, one of the mistakes that we have inside of the new patient visit, and this is on to number 2 here as well, is not making our patients feel seen and heard. Feeling seen and heard is one of the fundamental needs that we have as human beings. And if we don't meet these requirements, people will drift out of our practice. And so much of what we're going to talk about in this entire episode is making sure that our patients feel seen and heard, okay? Now, we do this by listening to people. If we make sure particularly our new patient visit is all about us and wanting to tell them about chiropractic care and what we do and why we're special, that is not going to make people feel seen and heard. We want to let them share their stories. When practice members come into us, they have a story, they've rehearsed it inside of their mind. They do want to talk to you about their symptoms. They do want to talk to you about their fears and frustrations. And if we make the mistake of not letting them share all of this, then there's a part of them that goes unheard. Now, number 3 in the report of findings, mistake that we make through here is that we're not giving long enough recommendations, okay? If we're not letting people at least know the potential of where we're going forwards. Now, my experience is, with most adults, and particularly, this is not just my opinion, if we understand the science behind it, if we understand tissue healing, if we understand what it takes to deal with inflammation, with the fibrosis, with the scar tissue that comes along with subluxation, then we understand this is a long-term process. And whilst we can see practice members get out of pain very quickly, sometimes in a matter of days and weeks, the underlying subluxations that there takes months and in many cases years. And if we don't talk to them about this on the initial visits, in the report of findings and in the new patient visit as well, then when it comes time to getting our recommendations, it can feel a lot out of the blue, can feel quite affronting for people there too, and it doesn't allow them to make the very best decisions, okay? So the report of findings, again, is not about retention. We need to convert and get them into care, but we also need to lay the foundations that let them know what's going ahead. Now, so with most adults, when I was talking to them and I talked about what it was going to take to correct subluxation, I was letting them know and I wanted them to understand that somewhere between 12 and 18 months is what it was going to take to return their spine back to their best condition. Now, I used to take a lot of re-x-rays. I did a lot of scans over the time. And with the busy lives that we have, that's just what it takes. And when I spoke with a lot of chiropractors and when I started to read and understand the science, it supported all of this, okay? So at the report of findings, we must be laying down the foundations and we must be giving recommendations long enough so they can feel the benefits and they can start to get into the habits of coming to see us. Mistake number 4 is a lack of confidence and certainty, okay? Now, when we have a lack of confidence and certainty, this undermines the patient's trust and engagement, okay? When you appear unsure about your diagnosis and your care plans, patients are going to question the validity of your recommendations. This will lead to hesitations and a reluctance for them to even start. And if they don't start care, then certainly we can't have a lifetime of retention, okay? Now, this uncertainty often leads to them diminishing your authority, your professionalism. It'll absolutely result in a decreased adherence to your care recommendations. Now, conversely, okay, confidence and assured presentation during the report of findings and in the new patient presentation as well is going to really advance your the patient moving into starting care and then, of course, staying in care as well. Now, when I talk about confidence and certainty, we need to look at this across multiple realms, okay? We need to have confidence and certainty in the philosophy that supports your paradigm of care. We need to make sure that we're philosophically sound, okay? We're looking for contradictions here because if there are contradictions in our philosophy there, it will lead to breakdown. We need to have confidence in the science that supports our findings and recommendations. Now, I know for me, this was a real key factor. I'll talk about that in a moment. The third thing we want to have here is confidence in our ability, the art, to be able to deliver a result that is to correct the subluxation. Now, in my early days, I really loved technique. I started off with a real love for Gonstead. I loved that it gave me a plan to be able to find a subluxation and to correct a subluxation. I also had a really strong foundation in chiropractic philosophy. Somehow, I found myself as a chiropractic student reading the green books, and this is partly where I very first fell in love with chiropractic. And so when I started out on my chiropractic journey, I had rock solid confidence in the philosophy and in the art for me to be able to deliver a result. What was missing for me was the science. And I didn't realize it was missing for some number of years. And it wasn't until I first heard James Chestnut speak and I realized that this was something that was missing. And that's when I dived deep into understanding the science. And once I had strength behind the philosophy, behind the art and the science from there too, my confidence and certainty skyrocketed. And this had a huge impact on my retention, okay? In essence, what you need to have is 100% confidence and certainty that your patient is in the right place to get the care they need. And if you don't have that, your retention will absolutely suffer. Okay. Now, there are many teachers out there that will help you depending on whether you need confidence in your technique, in the science like I did, or in the philosophy. But you can look around, ask your pals, go along to some seminars. If you get a little sneak peek from somebody, then dive in more. As I mentioned here before, when it came to the science, James Chestnut was absolutely pivotal for me, as also were people like Michael Hall, Dan Murphy. These were people that were really important in kind of helping me on my journey, okay? Number 5, when it comes to things that ruin your retention, is you either don't understand or you can't expertly communicate the difference between value and cost. These are not the same thing. Cost is the actual financial outlay. It's the 70, 80, 90 bucks that you are asking your practice members to give you when it comes to an adjustment. Value is what they get from it. Now, when the cost is either equal to or more than the value, people are going to choose not to come and see you. We always want to be creating an environment where value is higher than cost. And when this is the situation, people will naturally want to see you even when times are tough. Now, I want to share a little equation here with you, which I've shared previously, and maybe you haven't heard me talk about it. This is from Alex Hormozi in his book, $1 Million Offers. He says value is a combination of several different things. What we want to do is we want to be increasing the dream outcome. Now, what he's talking about here, when somebody comes to see us, whether it be with sciatica or whether it be with a colicky baby, the symptom they come in with is only part of it, okay? The dream outcome is more than just the symptom going away. It's the emotional layers that go a part of all of this. So, my experience is, and the story I often tell, and where this became most patently obvious to me, is when I had a practice member come in once, and I remember looking at her form, and she'd had 10 years of back problems before coming to see me. And I asked her, why now? You've had this problem going on for 10 years. What is it about it now? And she was able to articulate it really, really clearly. She said, Angus, the highlight of my day is when I get home from work and I go for a walk with my husband. We have a busy family life. I'm busy at work, and I love that time to connect with him before I have to get dinner ready for the kids and all those things. Now, my back has got to the stage that I can no longer walk with him. Now, at that stage, I realized that her dream outcome was not getting rid of her back pain. Her dream outcome was wanting to get walking again with her husband. Now, if it had been wanting to just get rid of her back pain, she would have been in to see me a decade ago. Now, when we can understand these things, when we can communicate these things, when we can constantly be relating to what is the emotional impact that is going on with the pain that somebody is presenting, this is incredibly valuable to them. Now, sometimes this can come to the patient very clearly. They can tell you exactly what the emotional component is, but often I don't find this out sometimes for many visits. Somebody needs to build trust. If the sciatica, for instance, is impacting somebody at work and they're self-employed and they're worried that the business might go bust and they might not be able to support their family, it's possible that they won't have the trust to share that with you immediately. Okay, I need to build trust, and it might be several visits in before I finally share this with you. So if you're unable to find these things in the early visits, don't worry. It takes time and it takes trust for somebody to share open and for them to be vulnerable. The other thing that we want to be talking about is that we want to be communicating with what Hormozi says is perceived likelihood of achievement, okay? Now, we can do this. There's several different ways that we can do this, but the way that Hormozi talks about is by having lots of case studies and testimonials of showing success in people similar to them. So we could just communicate. So here in Australia, for instance, we can't be using testimonials, although we are allowed to share testimonials one-on-one with our patients. And this is something that I like to do all the time with my practice members when they were having an adjustment. Rather than trying to educate them, I told stories, and I told stories about other people's or other patients' journeys through chiropractic care. And when they hear of and are constantly learning of other patients having success, it increased their perceived likelihood of achievement. The other thing that I would do is I would regularly break down the science with them. I would tell them about articles. I would simplify, and then I would say, here's what this means to you, Bill. Okay, so this is the things that we can do to let people know that they're going to get results. The other thing that we want to do if we want to be communicating in value is that we want to be decreasing the time delay. This is, we want to help the person get to results as quickly as possible. Now, this is why I think it's crazy sometimes when a chiropractor knows that they should be recommending 3 times a week, but they don't think that the patient's going to say yes to it. So instead, I will say twice a week. Now, when we do this, if we increase the time it takes them to get results there too, it's less valuable to them. Okay, we want to help that person get results as quickly as possible. Now, the other way that we deal with time delay, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on, is that we show progress. We need to be showing progress on a visit-to-visit basis. What's different from last visit to now? Okay, last time there was 5 subluxations. Today we're going to adjust 3. The leg length is normally the right side. It's normally 2 centimeters shorter. Today it's 1 centimeter short. Okay, I adjusted it this last time. It's this today. We should be subtly showing progress each and every time. Okay, this helps to decrease the perception of time delay. Okay, if there are things that you can do for your patient to help them get the results as quickly as possible, it increases value. And when we increase value, we increase retention. The fourth component that Hormozi talks about there is decrease effort and sacrifice. Make it enjoyable. Okay, make it easy for me to come and see you. I'll talk about several ways that we can do this as well. But if it's enjoyable, if it's easy for me to come and see you, it's less effort and sacrifice, and therefore it's more value. Now, not only do you need to understand the difference between cost and value, but you need to become an expert at communicating it. You need to be always positioning you and your care of value, and value in what's important for your practice member. And that's mistake number 5, is that chiropractors don't understand this or they're not communicating it. Now let's move on to mistake number 6, and I touched on this before, and that is we're not having progress exams at all, or we're not having them regularly enough. Now there are several purposes of a progress exam, but we can break them down into 2 key ones. Okay, there's a clinical purpose of why we do a progress exam, to assess what's improving and what's not, and make any necessary changes to our care plan. Okay, but there's also an educational component. It's an opportunity for us to connect with our practice members. It's have them feel seen and heard. Remember, we talked about that before. It's re-engage them. It's educate them on their progress, show them how far that they've come beyond just symptom relief. And it's about inviting and inspiring them to the next stage of their care. Now, probably for the first 12 months, I think that you should be doing a progress exam at least every 12 visits. Okay, so that they should be regular to begin with. In the first 12 months, we need to be having these moments here where we stop and we reconnect both clinically and from an educational point of view. Now, as somebody gets more into their care, we can start to space those out a little bit more, but we don't want to stop them. Okay, now often what happens is people get through their symptoms. They're doing really great. They get into their second year of care and we stop doing all of the things that worked in the first place. So it's a bit like romancing your partner, having the relationship doing really great, asking them to marry you, them saying yes, and then you stop doing all those things. Putting down the toilet seat, cleaning up after yourself, making the bed, making sure that you're showered and cleaned, okay? We need to make sure that we keep these things going all the way throughout. In fact, it's just important for us to be romancing our partner into the marriage as it was before the marriage as well, okay? Now, mistake number 7 is that we're not creating an emotional connection with our patients. You need to understand this. We make decisions emotionally, not logically. Now, we're going to justify them logically, but emotionally. This means it's about some level of connection that we have. Ongoing chiropractic care makes great sense, but if our patients don't have an emotional connection with us, our retention is going to suffer. So how do we go about creating an emotional connection? Okay, you're going to hear me say this again. We do this by listening deeply, okay, by making our patients feel seen and heard. We do this by validating their concerns, whatever they might be. We want to listen to them. So when somebody comes up with some form of objection management, we want to stop. We want to listen. We want to mirror back what they said. And then we want to let them know that makes sense. So in a report of findings, if somebody says to me, Angus, 3 times a week sounds like a lot. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that. I'm going to first of all say, thanks for sharing that with me. I totally get that. A lot of people tell me in the early days that 3 times a week sounds a lot. Now, what I've done there is I've validated their concerns. I'm not going to immediately jump in there and say something like, look, if this is important for you, you'll need to find the time. You need to understand how serious this is. I'm going to stop. I'm going to listen deeply and I'm going to validate their concerns. And I'm going to show empathy, okay? I'm going to put myself in their shoes. I'm going to connect with them, okay? So empathy is so powerful. I'm going to do things like I'm going to learn to use their name in their stories, okay? So by their stories, I mean, what are their stories of their lives? What are their hobbies? What are their families? I wanted to know in the early stages if their families went under care, what are their family members' name? Wives' names, kids' names. And I wanted to check in on those things. One of my goals for between adjustment to adjustment is I wanted this to be like a constant narrative. This was a conversation that you and I were having for 3 to 5 minutes during the adjustment, and we had this over 12 or 18 months. So if I knew on the weekend they were going out to dinner to see a show, I wanted to check in on that next week, okay? If I knew the kids were doing exams, I wanted to reflect back on that. I wanted to know what was important for them in their life. Now, often I look for really trivial things as well. Because when we share back even the trivial things, then maybe they just had a work meeting. Maybe there was something going on that they were a little worried about. When I checked back in with those things there too, it allows people to feel seen and heard there as well, okay? I wanted to be communicating between visits. So every now and then, the way that I did it is I just sent my practice members a text message, whether it was to further expand on their progress, whether it was to congratulate them on what was going on, whether it was to wish them well with an event that was coming up, maybe a family birthday or something like that too. But I wanted to have an opportunity. Now, this is not something I need to do on a weekly basis, but I wanted to do it a few times throughout the year. Quick text message to them. Sometimes I'd write a letter if I was up for that. Sometimes it's a birthday card. Sometimes it was an email. Sometimes it was a phone call. But I wanted to be making sure I was communicating between visits. Number 6 here, if I'm wanting to make sure that I'm creating an emotional connection, is I wanted to offer gratitude and appreciation. I knew that there was lots of different choices that my practice members had, not only for their chiropractic, but for their healthcare. And I wanted to thank them for their trust. I wanted to let them know how much I appreciated being a part of their healthcare team. I wanted to let them know that. So there were different times and milestones where I wanted to acknowledge appreciation for them, okay? So create an emotional connection with people, okay? Care. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And this is about creating an emotional connection, okay? That was number 7. Number 8 is not having a good recall system. Now, a number of years ago, I got really into Bikram yoga. That's the hot yoga for those of you who don't know. We'd go along 2 or 3 times a week. Lauren and I would go each time, and sometimes the kids would go. It was a hell of a struggle to begin with, but I sure saw great progress through this. And I got into the stage where I was into it. I loved it. I could work out through it. I loved the sweat, all of those things. And then something popped up in Lauren and my life that meant that we had a couple of weeks off. I can't even remember what it was now, but it was probably a holiday that we went away for. And then when we came back from that holiday, there was some catch up for a week. And then before I knew it, we got out of the habit of going along to Bikram yoga. And we never went back. Okay. Now, if the Bikram yoga studio had a good follow-up system and somebody had given me a call and said, Angus, we miss you. You and Lauren haven't been in for a little while there as well. Can we get you back in for Wednesday's class? We would have got ourselves organized and we would have got back into it again. The truth of the matter is that patients will miss, okay? They're absolutely going to miss because life gets in the way. And when they miss visits, it doesn't mean that they're unhappy with you. It doesn't mean that they're not liking chiropractic care. It doesn't mean any of those things. They probably just got distracted, okay? What we need is a system that follows up with people as quickly as possible. Now, when somebody missed a visit in our practice, our goal was to have a phone call to them within 15 minutes, okay? So that we could check in. Is everything okay? Do we have a follow-up appointment? If not, let's get one in there, okay? Now, if our front desk staff couldn't follow up with them within a couple of phone calls and they weren't back in there too, then it went on to our doctors. That's me. It says, hey, Tony's missed the last couple of visits. We've given him a couple of calls. We haven't caught up with him. Can you follow up with him? And then what I would do is I would call Tony, or I would send Tony a text message, okay? It would come from me. Now, our front desk would do most of these, but don't underestimate the power of you being engaged in this. It's also another sign that shows that you really, really care. So you must have a good recall and reactivation system. Without that, patients will miss, they'll get out of the habit, and before you know it, it'll be months before they'll come back, and then maybe they'll end up going somewhere else. Now, number 9 is not having a system to keep in touch with your patients between visits. Now, in psychology, we talk about a concept called the mere exposure effect, and it says simply this. The more often that we see somebody, or the more often we interact with somebody, the more likely we are to develop a real affinity, a likingness for them. Now, this means you're likely to have patients in the early days come to see you 2 or 3 times a week, but as they progress on, maybe it's weekly, fortnightly, monthly there too, we want to make sure that we're touching base with them more often than that, okay? Now, there are several different ways that we could be doing this. Social media is just one of them, okay? If you've got a really great social media account and you have orchestrated it so that your existing patients are following you on social media, they're seeing you there. You're popping up all the time. You're showing value. It's a reminder for them, oh, I need to go in and see Angus for an adjustment. I don't have an appointment. I need to pop back into that. But again, that affinity comes from just seeing people. It could be a weekly email that you're sending them, okay? It could be, a quarterly newsletter that you post out to them. It could be all of these things, but we need to have a system that keeps us in touch with our patients in between their visits. A system that adds values. It's not about interrupting them, but it adds value, okay? Now, number 10 thing that gets in the way of us having really great retention is you're not building community with them outside of your practice. Now, I touched on a few ways with that mistake beforehand, but workshops, events, how can we have a relationship with our practice members outside? Now, you've probably noticed that if you have kids and your kids go to school and you have lots of practice members and their kids go to the same school and you see these practice members at school drop-off and school pickup and maybe sport on the weekends and then maybe when there's a school concert, that relationship thickens, it becomes stronger. There's community that happens. Now, if your relationship is built just around the adjustment, there's only a certain amount of strength that comes from that. Now, one of the best ways to do this is just with, a quarterly workshop. Now, it could be an educational based workshop, but, Lauren at her practice will do anything. I mean, they've done drumming workshops. They've done workshops on making your perfume. They've done foam roller workshops. They've done women's health workshops. There are many different workshops that you can have. And again, you don't have to run them. You can get special guests in. I've done laughter yoga workshops, body language. I've done cooking classes, all these things. The purpose of them was to create community, okay, with our livers, to have them come into a safe place where we could connect together and they could see me outside the adjusting environment there as well, okay? So again, this could be some form of workshop. It could be an event. It could be an online thing that you could do as well. But having this form of community relationship with them outside the practice there was a very powerful retention tool, okay? Number 11, not having good front desk staff. Now, our practice members probably spend as much time, if not more, communicating, chatting, laughing, rejoicing with our front desk staff than they do with us. It should be an expectation with your staff that they are part of the healing team. On our front desk staff, when someone walked into the desk there, the very first thing that they saw is our beautiful smiling CA and a big sign that says your healing starts here. I wanted my front desk staff to know that they played an incredibly important role. Now, they weren't adjusting the patients, they weren't giving recommendations, but when they came into a smile, a conversation, when they made the practice members feel seen and heard, when they were building community, it made it so much easier for them to be supported in the entire journey. I wanted those relationships to happen. We need to make sure that our front desk staff need to be extroverts. They need to be communication masters. They need to be bubbly and effervescent. They can't be coming into the practice stressed. They can't be having conversations about themselves. A great CA will constantly be turning the conversation back towards the practice member. And one, we need to make sure that we are choosing the right front desk staff. And two, we need to make sure that we're training them. We're giving them a resource and the times to understand this, that they're educating, they're creating conversation. I loved it when, my CA had multiple people all involved in a conversation so people could look forwards to coming in, okay? Now, mistake number 12 is not taking regular breaks yourself, okay? Chiropractors, many of you are terrible at taking holidays. If your energy isn't high, if your enthusiasm isn't high, then we can get burnt out. And if we're coming into practice feeling burnt out, if we don't have that vibe about us there as well, that rubs off. I don't want to come and see you unless you're really buzzing, excited, enthusiastic, that you're happy to be there. If you're tired, exhausted, and burnt out there too, that's going to come through in the adjustment that you deliver. It's going to come through in the recommendations that you give, and you're not going to be magnetic, okay? It's a minimum of 4 weeks holidays that you should be taking. And I think it probably should be double that amount. Now, it might take you time to build up towards that, but you need to make sure that when you're coming into work, that you are enthusiastic, that you are energetic, okay? The final mistake I want to share with you today is about the environment, okay? Is your practice a nice environment to come into? Are you regularly updating it? Or do I come in there and is your practice still stuck in the 1980s or maybe the 1990s? Or maybe when was the last time you painted? When was the last time that you updated the pictures that were on the wall? Okay. These things fade. Our paint fades. It gets marked. Our carpet needs to be changed as well. I want a lovely environment to come in. Now, will the environment alone make the difference? No, but it's one of the key components. It needs to be a nice place for our practice members to come back into. This is one of the things that will have an impact on your attention. Now, let me quickly go through that list of 13. Let's sum those up really quickly. And as I'm going through this, you should be nailing down what are the 3 that I'm going to be starting on, okay? Mistake number 1 is that we put way too much pressure on the new patient and the report of findings visit, thinking that that's where retention comes from, okay? Remember, you can muck up retention on those visits, but you can't make retention that happens from there too. Number 2 mistake is a new patient visit that's not making our patients feel seen and heard. We're doing too much talking and not enough listening. Mistake number 3 is a report of findings where we're not giving long enough recommendations. We're not opening them up to what they should be expecting going forwards. Mistake number 4 is a lack of confidence and certainty, okay? And this is confidence and certainty across our philosophy, across our art, and across our science there too. Mistake number 5 is not understanding and or more likely, not communicating the difference between value and cost. Remember, value is about dream outcome, perceived likelihood of achievement, decreasing the time delay and decreasing the effort and sacrifice. Mistake number 6 is no progress or not regular enough progress exams. Remember, our progress exams is a clinical component, but there's also an educational component. Number 7 is not creating an emotional connection with your practice members. Remember, we make decisions emotionally. We justify them logically. We want to connect emotionally with our patients. Number 8 is not having a good recall system. Okay, we need to be right on it with this. Mistake number 9 is not having a system to keep in touch with your practice members in between their visits. Mistake number 10 is not building community with your practice members outside of the adjustment. Okay. Number 11 mistake is not having good front desk staff. Okay. Mistake number 12 is not taking regular breaks, making sure that you are energized and enthusiastic. And again, mistake number 13 was all about the environment. Remember, retention. There are 2 components for retention. If we're not keeping our practice members under care long enough, they cannot get the results that they deserve with chiropractic care. When practice members are coming to see us, they have a lifetime build-up of physical, chemical, emotional stress. The subluxation for most of them has been there since birth. It takes time. If it takes years to straighten people's teeth, okay, we can expect the same with regards to chiropractic care. It makes sense. If we build the relationships, if we explain clearly, then people will want to choose chiropractic care, okay? The second reason we want to be focusing on our retention is because it makes good business sense. We want to get off that continuous cycle of needing new patient week after week after week after week. We always want new patients coming in, okay? But we want to decrease some of the stress that goes along with that by making sure we have good systems where we keep people as well, okay? Search through these 13 mistakes here. Look at 3 of these that you can start to improve on this week, and then you can expand through the rest of the week, the rest of the list there as well. As always, folks, thanks for all that you do. Your patients, your community needs you to become masters, absolute masters of retention, because that's what helps them get the health results and the goals that they want. Until next time, thanks for what you do. See you soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.